Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's edition of Beyond the Vault. This is the weekly updates, of course, with Mr. Andy Sheckman. You can find him at milesfranklin.com. Andy, welcome back to the show. How are you, man?
JC, it's great to see you, brother. Thanks for having me. I'm good, buddy. Thanks. Hope you are too.
I'm doing well, and I have to say, things that you and I have been talking about for a number of years are coming to fruition in a big way and in a fast and furious way. We'll get into a couple of articles you've shared with me here today to discuss that, but I wanted to maybe preface this with what's happening right now. It feels, it feels to me as we're getting closer and closer to not necessarily the death of the dollar, but the acknowledgement of the death of the dollar, the de-dollarization that's been occurring over the last number of years that you and I have been talking about, is slowly now making its way to reality on mainstream news.
Yep.
And with that, part of my concern and why I do all of these shows and why I'm happy to have you on, I feel that I'm on YouTube, so I'm going to watch some of my words. Andy, still, we're triple casting today. I feel that similarly to the narrative that we were treated to in the last 3 years with one of the global events happening, we were not allowed to question anything. We were being told, trust the science, take the products, do this and do that, and everything will be okay. And those who dared even question and ask the most basic questions about the solutions being offered, they were being deleted from YouTube, social media, and were not allowed on mainstream news. My concern is that as we enter this death of the dollar phase, or the acknowledgement of it, is that we're going to see a lot of money, effort, resources put at constructing a narrative to explain why the death of the dollar is reality and what perhaps might be the proffered solution. And I hope that you and I are going to be able to have intelligent conversations about it. But I'm worried, given the track record of these big critical world events, that we're still going to see this censorship machine kind of force, I guess, some type of narrative. Are you seeing that now already? Are you feeling that? Do you have those same concerns? And why are you doing so many shows and podcasts? To me, it's because, again, you want to have an intelligent conversation and you care about the audience members. We don't want them to be fooled. We want them to be having intelligent conversations so that they can make decisions to protect themselves. But that's not always the case in this crazy, wacky world of ours. Andy, what are your thoughts on all that as
No,
we enter
I
this
think it's
phase?
it to me. It was the scariest part about what we saw during the pandemic is going on shows like yours and others. I was just on before yours with Sarah Westall. She actually had GoDaddy took her domain away from her, and I found this was back in 2020, and I found that and the things that she's talked about have been proven to be right.
Mhm.
And I found this cancel culture environment, the censorship environment we live in, is more frightening than just about anything. The erosion of being able to speak even politely about a topic. You know, these people are all about inclusion, yet any type of diversity in thought is, oh, no, 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 no. And yeah, it is concerning. And when we look at the Western media, Jean-Claude, they don't do anything. In fact, they don't do a poor job. They do no job. The only thing
Right.
that they seem to have done over the last several years is to create divisiveness. And I've been saying, this little buzz phrase lately, that our administration, and I would put our media over the last several years, have done more to harm this country than just about any external foe could have done,
Uh-huh.
creating all of this divisiveness and having to watch your words. That's not what this country is all about, especially if it's done respectfully with documentation backing it up. And
Yeah.
that's, one of the things that I know you're big on, and so am I. Sure, there's extrapolation and try to connect the dots, but when you base these analogies or these conclusions or hypotheses on fact, and
Mhm.
then connecting the dots comes a lot easier. And that's kind of how I had success in predicting a lot of the things that are happening right now with the petrodollar in Saudi Arabia. Just connect the dots, use fact, use logic, and Occam's razor says you'll probably be right if that's your conclusion.
Right. And to add to that too, I think that our conversations, at least from my viewpoint, enable, well, the audience, but myself also, to kind of like use other great thinkers as sounding boards so that it can navigate what's around us. And a big part of the conversation in the last number of years, um, and to some extent, it's been out there since the 1980s, is this idea of this NESARA, GESARA, quantum financial system. And unfortunately, a lot of the conversation when it comes to that seems to be anchored in the world of, again, trust the plan, or having faith in it, but without having seen any way, shape, or form how that ties into our reality. Now, you and I understand that there's good guys behind the scene. They're working at perhaps removing this, call it the parasite, over our back here on our financial system, but we're a long way from implementing a new one for humanity. We're in the death throes of the old one now, and we're just about to hit this fight now behind or between the decentralized and the centralized world of finances, right? We either have the choice to go to this multipolar world of currencies versus the old system, or an implement or re-implementation of the old system. And that means that we have to have our guards up, to be part of the conversation, to be part of the solution. And I worry sometimes with some of these narratives that are being proffered out there, that people are being lulled back, oh, just trust this, here's a new solution. Everybody has NDAs, we can't talk about it. Oh, the code is secret, so you can't see the code. And I'm like, whoa, that's very dangerous. And those are just types of comments that have brought us into the problems that we're facing now. What are your thoughts on all of these narratives that are coming out here, the quantum financial system, the NESARA, GESARA, um, uh, in respect to being responsible about it? Because we all understand that people are in the background trying to work on something to replace the old one. And we understand that there's a big fight at that level. There's the old guard trying to reintroduce something to continue their system of power and their matrix of control. And then there's the awakening humanity part, who are trying to do something themselves too. But that's very far from having to accept something that we don't know what it is, that we don't know who built, and that we were told, just trust it, sign on the dotted line, here's the next future for you. What are your thoughts on all of that, and the perils of maybe blindly giving our faith without actually asking the tough questions? Andy?
Well, we have a $34 trillion debt, right? Let's just sidestep that for a moment. We have 99 trillion underfunded in Medicare Part B, 77 trillion Medicare Part D, 22 trillion Medicare Part D, 77 trillion Social Security, all the government military pensions and the entitlements. That's all owed to us. Over the last several years, as the central banks of the world have witnessed weaponization of the dollar and inflation and a very unstable 10-year treasury market, that interest rates rose 500 basis points in a year, crushing the performance of the 10-year treasury and making it more volatile than gold for the first time in 45 years. This has incentivized countries around the world to shed treasuries. And the normal big creditors of our spending addiction have been selling treasuries, like China, who went from close to 3 trillion down to 700 billion slowly, not too fast to disrupt the apple cart, but fast enough. All these countries, Saudi Arabia, Russia, India, Japan, we're supposed to believe that the UK and Ireland and the Cayman Islands are the biggest holders of our treasury. Jim Willey is saying that the Fed's paying them under the table. Wouldn't surprise me one bit at all. But, the interesting thing about it is that as these countries have been selling treasuries, who's been buying them? That's us. The banks, the money markets, the hedge funds, the mutual funds, everyone's chasing yield. Only about 20+% of that debt is owed to the rest of the world. So when you talk about NESARA and GESARA, I don't think, you have to remember that someone's debt is someone else's asset. But if we were to incentivize the world to dump dollars, now we know that Saudi Arabia didn't re-up the petrodollar deal, and we know that every country in the world's had to stockpile them for 50 years to buy oil. We know that we've weaponized the dollar, and now we've gone to the crazy length of stealing, let's call it, not confiscate, let's call it stealing the Russian assets to pay for weapons to deliver to the country they're fighting a war against. You cross that line, you'll never be trusted again. That's smashing a glass against the wall. There ain't no putting it back together before mom and dad come home. Ain't happening.
Right.
And so we've incentivized all these countries to slowly de-dollarize. And when the realization becomes such, and we'll get into what I think will trigger that, or the beginning of a trigger, that this is the case, that the dollars are no longer needed, that they have chosen inflation over austerity, that they are a country moving around the world imposing sanctions, stealing assets, where, Putin goes and visits Kim, and we're very concerned that Kim's going to provide weapons, but maybe we need to do more sanctions. But who cares that we've given $260 billion to the Ukraine with no congressional oversight, and Javelin missiles and F-16s and the intelligence and where to drop it? We don't count. And China, if you give 1 penny to Russia, we're okay with you being friends, but you give 1 penny to them, we will sanction your banks, your businesses in Beijing itself. Don't worry about us. That's getting old. And so when you talk about Nasara Jasara, how about on a grand scale, right? Where all the debt's owed to us, most of it. And it's a whole lot easier to implement a CBDC or modern monetary theory and start over when it's to us. You reset the system by creating a villain rather than Janet Yellen or Powell falling on the sword for brain dead monetary policy and ridiculously irresponsible fiscal policy, where we're creating $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. Took 200 years to do that before. You incentivize the world not only through your weaponization and mismanagement of the dollar, but as we've talked about before, the lunacy of what's happening to this once great country, where the electoral system is questioned, the judicial system is questioned, the lawlessness in the cities, the immigration problem is out of whack for sure, and we're broke, we're insolvent, we're woke, we reward lifestyle and race and sex over merit. We've lost our bearings. That's not lost on the rest of the world. So you incentivize them to slowly at first de-treasurize, de-dollarize. And you look at gold, it's up 9.9% per year for since 2000. It's doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury with no counterparty risk. So these countries are accumulating gold and oil, which are now more valuable than the currencies used to accumulate them, as a form of savings instead of a treasury. When the realization comes, you got these reports written by the analysts for UBS and Charles Schwab saying this was a nothing burger with Saudi Arabia because the world still uses the bond market until the world doesn't. And the world is shedding the bonds. And these people who are clinging to this long in the tooth macro trend that the US has enjoyed are ignoring the reality of what's happening with these countries accumulating commodities in lieu of treasuries. And what starts out slow becomes faster and faster, and then bang. And when that bang happens and everyone says, I'm out, dump, 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 and they dump treasuries and dollars, the hyperinflation that would ensue would push interest rates to the moon. And as interest rates go to the moon to compensate for that spike in inflation, stocks collapse, bonds collapse, real estate collapse. The banks who hold everyone's money collapse. They're way over leveraged with no reserve ratio and undercapitalized. The insurance companies collapse because they're all loaded with treasuries. Everyone collapses, and those bastards did it to us. Now, to your point, to your question, yeah, it's a whole lot easier to default on us. All of us face the same fate. You all got screwed. He or she who loses least wins, of course, but you all got screwed. So here comes Nasara Jasara. You take the CBDC. That Lael Brainerd is the number 2. Remember, Jared Bernstein, the knucklehead, is the number 1 economic advisor, wants to lose the reserve status. Lael Brainerd, number 2, wants modern monetary theory, culling of the banks. Well, there you go. Take the CBDC, will make you whole. The only way Nasara Jasara happens is if there's an event where interest rates spike to the moon to compensate for that massive spike in inflation, and you now have just created a villain. And just like everyone thought it was okay to take a vaccine with no trials, just take it, it's safe. There'll be no side effects, we hope. That people will buy this too. Yeah, well, what are you going to do? The people who are out in the audience saying, I would never take a CBDC, but when everything blows up, including your banks and your insurance companies and your real estate and your stocks, everything, boom, poof. You come in and you take the CBDC. There's your Nasara, Jassara. Everyone starts over. And who did we default on? Mostly us. The rest of the world will make whole. But us, sign on that dotted line, Andy, and we'll make you whole too. And now you can feed your family. But how else do you get people to take the CBDC? It all goes hand in hand. And do I think it's too stupid to be stupid? Well, I hope our politicians are not that stupid. I think they understand this is a easier path, the path of least resistance, rather than being blamed for destroying what was the greatest system on planet the world's ever seen, and move towards basic universal income and a socialist agenda and redistribution of wealth and all of those things that the Cloward-Piven theory advocates for, which we talked about before. And remember, Jared Bernstein and Obama went to Columbia where Cloward-Piven theory was taught. So you put all these things together, yeah, I think it could happen. And it would happen on a grand scale where it's orchestrated and led by the top of the food chain, where we all get brought down to a common denominator. That's how it would happen.
You're painting a very different picture than the people who are proffering this as a solution, because what you're suggesting is that this leads into CBDC and, in fact, even more control, the credit score, the social credit score, and perhaps even this takeover from AI. I just watched this fabulous interview also with Catherine Austin-Fitts on Greg Hunter this weekend. She says, digital control, you've been warned. Again, she's sounding the alarm bells here for humanity to really ask questions about what's going on and to not take these proffered solutions lightly. I guess the fate of humanity and our own sovereignty is at stake here. So all of this is being tied in. And on one hand, it appears that these narratives are being massaged as a hopium type of a scenario on one corner as a limited hangout, and they're excluding anybody from even talking about it and asking the real questions and the real tough questions as to, hey, is this really good for humanity? Do we really want this? And as Bix Weir says, do we really want to have a bunch of controllers behind the scenes that we don't know who they are decide how they're going to redistribute wealth to people and then decide perhaps, whose bank accounts to freeze when they don't when they don't agree with the government? Anyways, go check out this interview with Catherine Austin-Fitts. Andy, I appreciate all of your thoughts on that. Let's get into some of the topics of the day here. You kind of alluded to it here. This is on Sputnik. De-dollarization bombshell, the coming of BRICS plus a decentralized monetary ecosystem. Here again, we're talking about the have-nots over the last number of years creating a new system outside of the old system. And we're moving into this multipolar world of currencies, and that is creating a huge stress on the matrix of control. And we appear to be reaching, as Jim Willie had said a while back, escape velocity here. Explain what's happening on the terrain. There's a couple of news items here for this week. Andy, take over the mic here and show us where you think this is going and how fast this new reality is forming here.
Yeah, so there was a meeting last week in Novigrad. And you remember we talked about there'd be 200 meetings from the beginning of the year till the end in October when the BRICS meeting happens. And that meeting, I think, was very relevant in the respect that the Saudi prince was invited to the G7 meeting, which was right around the same time. He turned it down. Instead, he sent his finance ministers to Novigrad. He turned down the G7 meeting. There it is. Sorry, I didn't mean to circumvent the story, but it all goes hand in hand because this meeting in Novigrad had 21,000 people attending from 139 nations with 80 billion in bilateral deals signed on the sidelines, where they're trading in local currencies and probably settling in commodities like gold or copper. In this meeting, Putin came out and said that the BRICS are indeed actively pursuing through the new development bank their new currency unit, and that trade logistics and sea routes are a major focus for cooperation. Now, if you think about it, when you talk about the BRICS and the Belt Road and the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, all of these countries are resource rich, and now they are focusing not only on resource, but also shipping lanes and trade logistics, which is huge. So if we go back a week before that and go to the next story, because this is where it gets wicked. And the week before that, there was the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. and this one right here. And in it, a few things came out that were said. And that is, number one, Putin said the Bretton Woods monetary system is dead and gone. Now, remember, Bretton Woods 1 was when we took over for the pound sterling and our currency was backed by gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. And then Nixon closed the
Just
gold
after
window.
World War, this is after World War II. Yes.
Right.
And
then
we moved to
Nixon
71.
closed the gold window in 71 because de Gaulle from France wanted all the gold for the dollars because realized we were choosing inflation to fund the Vietnam War and the guns and butter and all that stuff. So give me the gold. And we did. And then he closed the gold window. Now the dollar's back by nothing for a few years. But it was 50 years ago last week when the petrodollar deal was signed by Kissinger that was just not re-upped. And now we're Bretton Woods 3, and Zoltan Pozsar says that's, a system that will be explained by commodities. So he says the Bretton Woods system is dead. There is no other guarantee, so to say, other than confidence in the U.S. economy. And he also went on to say that the BRICS are indeed working on their own payment infrastructure. And then he had a meeting with the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, a woman named Dilma Rousseff, who later confirmed by Rousseff about something called the unit. And this unit, they have said, will be a transactional form of cross-border payments anchored in 40% gold and 60% BRICS plus currencies. Now, when Sergei Glaziev told us about this 3 years ago, he said that's what it would be, except it would be a basket of commodities.
Right.
But I think it's far too hard to control and monitor a basket of commodities rather than the only other tier 1 reserve asset in the world, according to the BIS. And you look at all the central banks who've been buying gold hand over fist for the last 4 years. But look at what India did here recently. They bought 1.5 times the amount of gold they did all of last year in the first 4 months, but repatriated 100 metric tons of that gold back to India. Well, they're now holding almost all of their gold for the first time since 1991. And we've seen the central banks buying gold at levels the world's never seen. The biggest first quarter this year was the biggest ever, which overtook the biggest quarter in 2023. They're buying it at a level the world's never seen. And at the same time, what started a few years ago with the Bundesbank, the Bank of Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Poland, the Dutch National Bank, the Czech National Bank, all repatriated their gold from the Bank of England, i.e. the LBMA, and the New York Fed, i.e. the COMEX, now has gone to Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Senegal, Cameroon, Algeria, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, all just pulled their gold back following India's suit from the same locations, removal of counterparty risk. So let's continue with the story anyway. So she says it's going to be 60% currency, 40% gold, tier 1 asset. Everyone's buying, everyone's repatriating, replacing the bond market as an asset that's doubled the 10-year treasury in performance over the last 25 years with no counterparty risk. So the day after this meeting, Putin and Dilma had another even more important meeting, as this article talks about, with Sergei Glaziev, who is the Minister of Macroeconomics for the Eurasian Economic Union. And these are all the countries in and stand. And they will integrate into the BRICS along with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I've said that for 3 years. There now is a rallying cry to do just that, led by the president of Belarus. But anyways, at the end of the meeting, she comes out and says, she's the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, not a small position. She revealed that she had already discussed the unit with Putin, and it was agreed that there will be a special conference in Shanghai on the unit in September, 1 month before the meeting in October. So this article surmises that it says that the system has every chance to be able, during the BRICS summit in October in Kazan, to be adopted. And we also learned at the meeting last week, or in St. Petersburg, that no less than 59 countries and counting plan to join not only the BRICS, but also the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union. And so you're getting a force, 59 and counting on top of the 10, that's 69. You have the majority of human population, military might, GDP, commodities, all of these things. And they've also, there was just a report that came out by the head of commodity research for JP Morgan, just to give you an idea of the things that are happening. Look, we know the Chinese bought the LME, the London Metals Exchange, a few years ago. That's all the base metals, copper, zinc, lead, you name it. Mm-hmm. Head of JP Morgan Research came out and said that in 2022, China produced 68% of all the world's rare earth minerals and 70% of the graphite, which is used in lubricants and electric motors, et cetera. But their real dominance lies in they produce 100% of all of the world's graphite and all of 90% of the world's rare earth minerals and 74% of its cobalt. This green agenda, we haven't thought this out real well. They're buying all of the world's commodities. They are securing trade routes. They are working with countries in the Belt Road, in the BRICS, that are resource rich and trade and sea shipping lane rich. They have a way larger military might. All of these things are beginning to come together. And the last piece is Project mBridge. We've talked about Project mBridge. They have now become a full participant in Project mBridge, which is the cross-border payment system that allows all of these countries to remain autonomous from the BRICS in terms of one common currency. Instead, they all keep their own central bank digital currencies and trade with one another cross-border, just like we were told 80 billion in these bilateral agreements were settled on the sidelines. That would be trading yuan for corn from corn and soybeans from Brazil, who then takes those yuan and sends them back to China and takes possession of gold off the Shanghai Gold Exchange, where it's immediately convertible. And now you have, what is gold? It's the only other tier one asset that's going to be the cornerstone of the new BRICS currency. How do they get all that gold? Well, we just saw $500 million in gold delivered off of COMEX in a contract that was developed in 2015 by the COMEX for delivery at BRICS Hong Kong, who then trucks all those kilo bars over to the Shanghai Gold Exchange for the ability for these countries to take delivery of the commodities that they exchange, and maybe even countries sidestepping sanctions like Iran, trading their oil for yuan immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which they bled down from the COMEX and the LBMA. But what this mBridge allows these countries to do, and remember the first two trades we saw last year, the test trades, were cross-border trades for gold and for oil. Yeah. And now they're using it here in 2024, but it enables these countries to remain autonomous, to trade their local currencies, but settle in the common settlement currency, which will be 60% basket of all of the currencies involved in the BRICS plus 40% in gold. So that immediately chips away at the dollar settlement status and begins to destroy the reserve status. You do not need to have a reserve currency if you replace it with a common settlement currency back to gold, and you use gold and oil as a supplement or a complete and total replacement for what has a small sliver in human history, that being considering another country's debt as an asset. Instead, let's take real commodities, as Zoltan Pozsar says. And so these countries are cooperatively in the BRICS. They are not forced into the BRICS. They use their own CBDCs over Project mBridge and settle in a common settlement currency pegged to gold and a basket of currencies. This shit's happening, and it's starting to spin, and to underestimate its significance will be the downfall of a lot of very wealthy, powerful people, including the head of commodity research for all these banks that are saying, oh, Saudi not re-upping, it's a nothing burger because of the bond market, blah, right. blah, blah. Yeah. The bond market is slowly being detreasurized, and they are accumulating commodities in their place. And these people who learn more and more about less and less know everything about nothing, and they won't see it coming. So your people will. The fuse has been lit. The little by little is accentuating and accelerating. When is the all at once? When is the Project Sandman where bang, they dump it? Don't know. But when that happens, it will be a religious experience in this country. There is no question.
Well, there's already a timeline here for this $40% backing of gold here with the 60% in BRICS currencies set up. You just mentioned at the beginning of the show that gold has been outperforming if you compare it. Even with that, and even with all the manipulation, we're seeing gold stand on its own. But that's nothing, I'm presuming here, to when this is finally announced and when people actually realize, oh, the dollar is actually dead. There's going to be ramifications, as you just said, of us defaulting on our own debt, what that means to our pension funds, to our real estate, to all these valuations of what we think make us wealthy, that's all going to be subject to change by this. To what extent and how fast that happens, that's the question. But again, this whole idea, and what you and I are trying to warn people about, is these limited hangouts of all of these other schemes on the side where you're not allowed to question anything. You're missing the point of what's happening or truly happening in the background, stuff that's tangible that we can actually see, these meetings, these peoples, these dates, and the implementations with these agreements being put in place. Andy, like as we sit now with gold, if we were to back international trade even at 40%, where does that place gold?
Well,
Where do we have
it's interesting, and I got to give credit to Chris Marcus, our mutual friend, my brother, and I love Chris and his partner or his guest who was I watched. He turned me on to this, and I read everywhere. I scour everywhere. I love you, Jake. I read everywhere, and he turned me on to this. It's so hard to keep up with what's happening, and the world has no idea what's coming because our media hasn't said a word about this shit, not a word.
No.
And so people are just, even the well-read people reading the wrong stuff have no idea what's coming at them. But look, JC, I think that this becomes very real and happens very, very fast. And I mean, I don't know. I just think that this is something that it cannot be underestimated. It cannot be underestimated. And it's happening in a manner where people have no idea that this is the beginning of a sea change. And it will happen slowly at first. When the realization is that this is actually happening and that by holding dollars, you're going to get kneecapped as the rest of the world starts to sell them, that's when it starts to get very, 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 very concerning. And it hasn't happened yet because the information, these people have been so methodical in the way that they have used the Western suppression of commodities to readjust and de-dollarize, de-treasurize, to reposition themselves. And they are continuing to not let it be known exactly what they're doing, how they're doing it. You can see if you look closely enough. But by the time the collective realization of what has happened or what is happening is acknowledged, it's going to be way too late. And so I think that this is something that, we're already late in the game, but you can see it's happening, JC. And if our media did half a job of saying exactly what happened, that the Saudis didn't re-up the petro deal, and we're in trouble in terms of the way the world is looking at us, and our treasuries are being sold and gold is being accumulated. Like someone said earlier, you're the news, you are, and the news is keeping so many people in the dark. There, I think it will be to the detriment of a lot of very wealthy people who are trapped in a system that is becoming very long in the tooth. And when this hits, when that all at once moment happens, the traditional assets will blow up faster than, it's a little by little that people become naysayers and poo-poo and disregard because of its length. The all at once will freak people out by how fast it happens.
Right. And that's what's, I guess, bothering me or concerning me with people who are just now on the cusp of waking up and they're seeing these articles. It's so enticing to believe in some of these other solutions that would take you off the hook from all of your financial woes. We're all getting through the being passed through the ringer. Here in Canada, there's another study that said, hey, Canadians are even poorer than they thought, as we're hitting reality here with this hyperinflation. And so it's interesting to think that there'd be an outside solution that would come fix all our problems, but that's not the way humanity has worked in the past. And right now we're seeing people actually do the work to create another system. And so if you're on the sideline hoping that somebody else will fix something for you, you're probably on the wrong side of this bet.
Maybe it's because I inhaled in high school, but I forgot to answer the question, how high does gold go? My short-term memory kind of gets away from me. It's interesting that gold is held in every central bank balance sheet in something called the gold revaluation account.
Yeah.
And how high does it go? I don't know. With a 40% pegging, this is why you got guys like James Rickard says it goes to 27,000, and he just took the, I think, M2 and divided it into the amount of gold and came out with 27,000. Jim Sinclair always said 10,000. And with 40% backing, that gives them 60% monetary latitude to do what central bankers like to do. But that 40% backing, using distributed ledger technology to show the veracity and the immutability, having it audited, having it in such that it, the veracity is never challenged, you have the potential for gold to go higher than anyone think possible, and never to come back down, as it acts as an anchor to a system that is lacking trust and has for the last 50 years. And no one will drink that Kool-Aid again when everyone pissed in the punch bowl, unless you get a new punch bowl with some form of immutability. And that's gold, which acts as the anchor.
All right. I don't want that punch bowl anywhere near my next family party.
Exactly.
But going back to the price of gold here too, whether you talk about Jim Rickards or Jim Sinclair and the way they were calculating based on known numbers and numbers provided to us by the government. And that does not take into account perhaps all of these over-the-counter derivatives that, who knows, it could add to those numbers. So,
well, Jim Sinclair always called those derivatives as a weapon of mass financial destruction. And he used to say that geeks are going to kill us all, because he means the financial geeks who have created quadrillions of dollars worth of derivatives where no one knows the value, because the value of derivative is based upon the counterparty's ability to perform. And when you have, when you sell these credit default swaps, which is insurance against those trades, well, enough go down. That's why I had to bail out AIG, or the whole system was going to collapse. So when you build a system of tremendous leverage and undercapitalization, it's a recipe for disaster when credit starts to contract. And that's the thing. Just as bullish as all these asset price explosions have been because of easy credit, and this is Bill Holter's line of thinking. And when you have an expansion of credit, even as the father of Austrian economics always said, that they will always be followed by a massive contraction. And that massive contraction will be equally or exponentially more destructive because of all the leverage. And you yank the credit away, and all of a sudden everything dries up and shrivels and collapses under its own weight. But the systemic nature of all the interconnectedness is what brings down the whole house of cards. And now you're reset. And if you do it the right way, you have a villain to point to, because it is too stupid to be stupid. We could never have been this stupid to think our actions would not have, equal opposite reactions according to the laws of physics. So I don't know, JC. I don't think we've ever been closer, ever. And these things that were once some form of hypothesis are now coming true, which really scares me. Because I've never had that ability, and maybe I got lucky. I don't know, but I've seen this clearly. Just not how fast it's unwound. And there's 3,000 YouTube videos out there since 2019 that will prove that. I'm not patting myself on the back. I was saying I'm scared by it, because I never would have imagined how fast this is happening. And then you throw into it the draft. Now they want to, and then sneak women into the draft in 2025, and I mean, there's all sorts of scary things happening right now. And I pray for this country. I pray that, the United States has always done best with its back to the wall, but we are not united anymore. And that's a big problem. Go back to World War II. We loved our neighbors. We left our doors unlocked, and, you didn't worry about these things. And this isn't the same country anymore. And I hope we find that spirit somewhere.
Yeah, Clip's in the chat. He says, I guess this is per his latest data run. He's saying that gold will ride a huge peak for about 7 to maybe 10 years here as the U.S. gets its shit together and starts serious mining of the Grand Canyon and elsewhere. To some extent, I want to go back also to what you were saying about this fear tactic and the powers that be creating a boogeyman over here to explain why all of this is happening. I want to run this by you and see what you think. A couple of months ago, Dennis Quaid was on Tucker Carlson talking about this EMP event, and he was reading from some notes, mind you, but he said it's not a question of if but when. And so that seemed to be in the pre-programming stage here of our global consciousness. And I thought that was interesting because now, just a couple of months later, we have this Russian sub here. This one here was in the UK, but we also have one on the coast of Florida. And there was this study made a couple of years back. I think it was I forget which university it was. It wasn't MIT. At any rate, that had studied how to create the maximum effect of an EMP over the United States. One of the best locations from which to launch would have been the Caribbean. And so there now we have these Russian subs there just in Florida.
Yeah, that's 70 miles away from my house. I get it.
Yeah.
And the guy who produced it is a client of mine, or someone I see at Rick Rule's conference every year. He sent me, he did Dennis Quaid narrated a documentary where he talks about all of this, about solar flares. There was one, I forgot the name of it, the something effect that happened way back when. And
the Carrington effect. Yeah.
That's it. Blew up all the telegraphs, and the likelihood of it is extreme. And and you set off a nuclear weapon high up in the atmosphere above Wichita, Kansas, you blow up the entire country's electrical grid and the internet. And I mean, these things are very, very, very concerning. And this is one of the things, I think, one of the reasons why people like Big Swear, and I can't disagree, will tell you you don't own it if you don't hold it. Now, if that doesn't work for everyone or every instance, hopefully it's in a great storage facility, but there is some truth in this world we live in. The removal of counterparty risk is huge. When you look at all of the countries buying gold, what's the common denominator? They are removing counterparty risk by bringing back their gold home. And that's a big deal. One of the things that I don't know enough about also as it relates to all this is the quantum computing system. And I saw that Cliff, hey Cliff, how are you, brother? I know he's out there. He just did a video on it. I have it bookmarked to read and listen to it. But I'll tell you that I think, having a system that is that vulnerable, and what Dennis Quaid talked about was that our electrical grid is so antiquated that this would happen and it would take forever to rebuild it. And that Biden has mothballed production of these transit, I forgot what they're called. Cliff probably knows, but the things at the top of they're called transformers.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were way behind the eight ball in terms of modernizing this. And he says Quaid says it's, let alone war, that you can get this just by Mother Nature. It's happened before, a solar flare, and everything goes poof, just like that. So, who knows? It's a reality. And these are the kinds of black swans that no one thinks about, but should be. And this is why, when you think about what Zoltan is saying, this is a system about commodities. And there's something to be said for that, commodities in your own possession.
Yeah. Speaking of commodities in your own possession, guys, if you're looking for gold and silver, you can go to beyondmystic.net/silver. Here we have still, I believe, Andy, the pre-65 dimes and quarters. In times of Carrington events or communications down, of course, going to be very useful. But on the bigger scheme, also removing counterparty risk with your hard-earned assets as we go through this period of time. What do you have? Do you still have the pre-68 or the pre-65 here in the States for the audience members? How's the supply?
We do, and want to say hi to Tina and Donald, and I think they're in Alabama. Hey, you guys, appreciate it. I think junk silver is the best buy in silver right now, not even close. In comparison to where it's been. Now, that's last week's specials. I think what we have right now are 10th ounce platinum Britannias and kilo bars from Italy. We still have a good amount of the junk silver, and I'm sorry for not updating that with you, but the junk silver to me is the best buy there is, period, because during the last 3-4 years, it was had the highest premium of anything except for Silver Eagles. The utility that it offers, the versatility that it offers has had people during the pandemic. That's what everyone wanted, and you couldn't find it. This is why they say there's no bull market like a gold bull market, JC, because the higher the price goes or the freakier the world gets only reinforces the grip that you have on it. And so it's different than other bull markets where you're incentivized to take profit and reinvest and do these things. So right now, the premium has not, it collapsed like all premiums did, and now the coins are starting to move up again, and the junk silver, which was higher priced than everything but Silver Eagles, is below all the other sovereigns. It's the best value there is, period, right now. So we do have it, and I strongly recommend it.
Guys, do go check it out. We're almost out of time here for today. In the meantime, if you're looking for this Nicera Jacera progress report from Clefai, you can find it on his Substack. The links are in the description box below. And Janine and I did also do a narrative decode on this very topic last night on the pay-per-view, and we decided to make that part of the episode free to all of you here on Rumble. Again, to encourage an open and honest conversation here about our financial system, where it goes, and our responsibility in putting all of that together. As Clefai was saying here, it may take many years for us to get our shit together, but before we do that, we have to state things as they are, and we have to be allowed to ask the tough questions about all of these proffered solutions that are just around the corner here, as we're seeing the BRICS put in place their 40-60 split with this new currency here that is set to be put in place for September. So we're running out of time to have these conversations and to weather the storm through all of this. So a big thank you to all of you watching today. Andy, a big thank you as well for being on the show and sharing all of
Anytime,
your
brother.
insights. Really love
Anytime. You're like I've always said, you're the class of the industry, and you are so well-rounded as a human being. The depth of information that you give and the how broad it is phenomenal. I am honored to be here. Truly, I mean that sincerely. You're a hell of a nice guy, but you are contributing. When you meet your maker someday and he says, "What the hell did you do?" "Oh yeah, you're JC, you're in." And I mean that. I mean that. And God bless guys like you who have the courage to do what you've done. And it's an honor to be here. So thank you. And I look forward to continuing as this. I have every inclination to believe that the next several months will be the craziest of our lives. And I hope I'm wrong. But remember, as the Chinese curse goes, may you live in interesting times. And these are interesting, brother. So thank you for having me. And I look forward to picking up where we left off real soon.
Thank you so much, Andy. And folks, if you want to join me at 3 o'clock Eastern here, Meg and Mr. Jay Weiner are going to be joining me here for the part 2 of the Terminator Decode. This is on Judgment Day. And I'm going to tie into that some of the warnings from Catherine Austin Fitz's last video with Greg Hunter on AI. So you guys don't want to miss that. It's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern. And of course, tonight at 8 o'clock, Jenny and I will be back on the Beyond the News here for the IAP and pay-per-view crowd. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.